Hello, let's talk about books and coffee. So we're back here again talking about the books that I read in 2022 while I still remember them. Now, if you've been watching this series, you'll know that's a struggle. And that's why I have under this pile of books my trusty bullet journal to help me remember what I read. Doesn't always work. Anyway, thank you for being here. If you want to see more of this stuff, subscribe, and let's get on with it. We're up to book book 21 for 2022. That's a tongue twister. Age of Ash by Daniel Abrams. Daniel Abrams is one half of James S.A. Corey, who wrote The Expanse and has done other stuff in independently as well, which I haven't read. I tried, I failed. So I thought I would just give this one a go. It's the first in a trilogy, I think it's intending to be, of epic fantasy. Published in February 2022. I read it from March to April. This one, because it's a setup in a trilogy, there's a lot going on that's obviously set up for the bigger, wider world story. There's the main character whose brother dies really early in the story. I hope that's not too much of a spoiler. It's like the central point, and it's the exploration of her grief and revenge, but in doing so both her brother and she are caught up in like the wider machinations of, you know, kings and gods, as you do. I've written here in my notes, all the female characters who get a speaking role are dealing with a grief of one sort or another, which I really enjoyed. And that was the compelling part for me, was the exploration of grief. There was like an intrigue and a heist and the long con with the like forces unknown and unknowable, and I was bored. I'm not going to pick the others up, it doesn't interest me at all. And I gave it 3 stars, I guess. How vicious. Oh my goodness. Bullet journal me is a bitch. So anyway, I mean, it's perfectly serviceable as a fantasy, and if you enjoy like that sort of thing, I think you'll really enjoy this one. But I was not compelled. So we put it down and we move on. And we move on to something completely different in the form of Australian historiography non-fiction. This is Making Australian History by Anna Clark, which was published again February this year. I read it in April. Here's the thing, I've got that I started it on the 22nd of April and I finished it on the 8th of April. So, sure past me. I thought this was going to be a different book than it is. I thought it was going to be a debate on Australia's history wars, which is basically 2 approaches to the way that historians write Australian history. And now we have culture war and everybody knows about it, but in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, it was really like history, culture war. And I thought it was going to be that, but really it's more about how historians have written Australian history over time. So it is a historiography book. Will that interest you? Probably no. I thought it was really interesting. It definitely explores how Australians came to define a sense of nationhood and a sense of self through the writing of history, which is part of what history does. And define that cultural story that we have about ourselves, and how, as time has gone on, historians have started to realize that maybe we should also incorporate the story of non-white people. That's the big takeaway from that. I mean, it seems obvious in retrospect, doesn't it? Like all history books, it takes case studies and uses that to extrapolate the point. And if you're interested in the way that history is written, and Australian history in particular, pick it up. It's absolutely readable. It's not that thick because, like all good academic books, it's got footnotes and references, and it takes up a lot of the page space. My notes say absolutely niche but interesting, which I have to stand by. It absolutely is. I gave it 3 stars, which means I liked it. And I definitely took away some notes of more things to read because I'm that nerd. I'm unashamed. Next was another non-fiction, which is actually on my non-fiction TBR that I made at the end of last year or the start of this year, which will be linked wherever the linking happens, I don't know. And this is Sea Monsters on Medieval and Renaissance Maps by Chet van Duzer. I think this is the only thing I've read off that TBR. So that's going to be exciting for me. Anyway, this was published in 2013, and it's probably one of those books that I bought for myself and told my family that was my Christmas present, just because it sounds cool. I mean, look at it. Look at it. I mean, how could you not? So it was published in 2013. I read it in May this year. And oh god, this bullet journal me is vicious. This is basically a journal article given enough publishing space to include all the cool pictures and all the translations as well as originals of the quoted texts. So that actually makes it a really quick read. It's a lot of showing the examples of the maps and the creatures on the maps. The conclusion reached is that sea monsters on maps were probably included on the whim of the artist or the cartographer. There's no clear tradition of including them on maps, although some illustrators influence others, obviously. There's some things in here I have to show you. Like, it's an exploration. I gave you the TLDR, but some of these creatures, I had a lot of fun quizzing my daughter, like, what do you think this is? Sea pig, obviously. This is just a page of various walruses. Sure. I mean, clearly it's like those manuscripts where you're like, you've never seen this animal before, have you? You've just made it up. This one I like. It's famous. That's Leviathan circling the world. And of course, this one's a classic. That's an octopus. Sure, sure bro. There we go. It was good. I recommend. A couple of episodes ago I had the Guy Gavriel K hour, and there's more of that. This is A Brightness Long Ago by Guy Gavriel K, and this is because the third one set in this time period came out this year, so I read the first two. It's set in Renaissance Italy. It's a reflection of a guy towards the end of his life about a pivotal event that happened in his, I want to say, early 20s, and the way that that influenced his life and affected what happened to him going forward, and in the way that it influenced world events as well, which is very typical of K, in that like little things that happen to people have broader impact, and the way that you don't notice at the time because you're living through it, but on reflection, that was one of the pivot points of your life story. I've written here in my notes, it's a reflection of who you were and are, and how they can be the same thing and different at the same time, and how that came to be. This isn't my favorite K novel, but all of them have something to give you on every read, I think. And so reading this the second time, I definitely got more out of it, because I thought I knew what I didn't like about it, and so when I came back to it, those parts had something different to tell me. And that's something I really love about K's novels, and I will reread all of them forever. And beyond you reading them or having read them and already know what I'm telling you, like there's nothing more I can say to convince you that these are awesome and my absolute faves, and definitely up there with Lois McMaster Bujold of like my aspirational PhD. So much to do, so little time. Okay, and then the final book for this video is Notorious, Sorcerer by Davinia Evans. Now, I have two copies because this is the ARC that she sent me, and this is the release version that came out actually this week when I'm recording this. So, aren't they gorgeous? I love it. It's beautiful. Anyway, Notorious Sorcerer came out 13th of September. I read it in May because I got the ARC. I have written a whole review about this. I will link below, and I think I put it on Instagram too. Like, I'm so excited for Davinia to have got a book out into the world, because she's someone that I've known in Australian weblog land since the 90s, and it's so exciting to see people doing cool shit. So it's all her. I just want to support her because I think it's awesome. Notorious Sorcerer, it's about a guy called Scion, who's basically a shit kicker. He's does like alchemical smash and grab runs on different planes and to sell alchemical items to alchemists, obviously. But he doesn't, and he wants to learn, but he doesn't have the funds to be taught. And of course it's that exclusive power club where you need money to be invited. But events ensue in which Scion learns that he can do stuff that doesn't require training, of course, and then becomes the person who could break or save the world, of course. And he ends up with a sidekick who's part of the power class, of course. And there's like a real feels romance in there, and there's like class, what do I say, the class, there's like the tension between class and power, and it was awesome. Like, if you love that thing, if you love like a snarky main character and saving the world and magic and massive stakes and feels and romance, you'll love this one. It's a really good time. It really stood out to me that there's a scene where they go to the university and they have to put gloves on to handle an ancient text, and that made me cross because you don't do that. But maybe the rules are different here in this world. I did tell Davinia that, and she laughed at me and called me a nerd, which is fair. So this one got 3.5 stars from me, which is not a diss. That means I liked it a lot. You can absolutely tell that she's informed by both Guy Gavriel K and KJ Parker, because it's that intricacy of world building plus just full-on snark, and I am here for it. Highly recommend, plus Australian author, plus my friend. So I'm not gonna kick this one down. Alright, that felt really fast and rushed, so I hope it was cogent. That's my main hope when I record these things, and it doesn't always happen. Subscribe if you want to hear more about what I've been reading, or other things. Like, I do other things on this channel, it's just it doesn't always work. Please recommend books to me because I am highly influenceable. I will buy anything. And slide into my DMs or chat with me in the comments, or visit my website, or just have a great day. We will do this again sometime. Bye.